What is up, coders? We're here with yet another Redux video coming from me based on another student question, actually from the same student that asked the same student that asked the question that spawned my previous playlist called persisting Redux state to an API, or at least asynchronously. And they had, again, more questions based on this project they were building that was an idle game that had like a timer that ran that would cause state updates and the game to kind of play itself. They're called idle games. They had another great question about dispatching state and then using the next state value to inform the next dispatch, right? So there is some trickery around that concept because it didn't work the way the student thought it was. And this is actually it's a classic conundrum that I harp on not only in our Discord, but in my React course. And the purpose of this video is to answer the question, how can I dispatch an action to our Redux store, and based on the newly calculated state value, how can we then inform the next dispatch to fire off correctly? So that's going to be the goal here, and this is a very contrived example, and contrived is my favorite word to just hand wave away complexity. It's like a Jedi mind trick going, this is the contrived example you're looking for. It lets me just boil down this student's otherwise complex app and question and use case into something simple and manageable here in what I'm choosing to do, which is create React app with Redux Toolkit implemented fairly simply. There are going to be several links in the description down below. One to my previous video series called Persisting Redux State, and in particular, the first video, I do a little crash course on implementing Redux Toolkit, but not something super in-depth. And also links to our website, Covalence.io, and where you can sign up and join Gravity, where if you're interested, I do have a React course that covers Redux Toolkit, Jutai, a little bit of recoil, and every advanced little bump the microphone there much, do I? Just bam, smash it. Where I have a React course that covers all of the core React and advanced APIs, custom hooks, state management libraries, patterns, and things like that. It's a pretty cool course. I put a lot of effort into it, and I hope y'all join and sign up. At the very least, I would love to see y'all get involved in our Discord, where if you don't buy a course, even you come in there and chat with us and ask questions and, well, just try and code stuff with Node, JavaScript, Express, and React, and whatever. We're here to help. Anyway, I'm not going to go over the setup, writing out all the code and explaining it. I'm just going to give you all a quick rundown. Our count piece of state starts as a value of 1. Our slice does nothing more than have one action creator called increase. It increments it by 1 every time we dispatch the increase action creator. Divisible by 4 is a dumb contrived, favorite word, example that has a value of false. And it has a simple toggle here that will, a toggle action creator that takes the current state, and an action, unlike our slice, which require no action, just takes the state and increments it by 1. This one takes an action, and we're going to pass in the payload, which would be the count piece of state, and we'll check to see if it's divisible by 4. I've been saying that word a lot, and I feel like I'm getting worse at saying the word divisible, where I have this little ternary check to toggle the state from true to false. And I hear my cat Percy crying in the background. What is it, buddy? Percy? He's back there crying. Okay. I think he wants water from the sink because we have bowls of water around the house, but he demands sink water. So this is our action creator called toggle. That's all there is to it. There's nothing magical about my store setup. I'm just using the configure store function from Redux Toolkit. Again, I cover this in my course if you're interested in knowing more about all this stuff. And that's it. And my app simply displays the 2 pieces of state. I have my dispatch and my 2 action creators ready to set up and go, but I haven't used them yet, as that's going to be the crux of the issue. I'll be showing you and then showing you some solutions to it. I use some styled components to make this not look like vanilla HTML. I mean, this doesn't look very fancy, but I like playing and goofing. I haven't used styled components in a little while, so I decided to throw it in there just to test my knowledge to see if I still remember how to write it from scratch and not have to Google anything. Little personal pop quiz to myself. But this will be available, and again, the description below, there's going to be tons of links via a repository that you can just copy over to Code Sandbox or clone to your own machine and goof with it if you want to try and follow along. All right, so this is a fairly simple application right now where it simply console logs this lovely phrase clicked over here in my console window every single time I click that button. It does nothing as of right now, so let's get going. Dispatching an action to our Redux store will simply invoke our action creator. We called it increased. I called it increase, not we. You all didn't do anything. It's all me. I had this action creator called increase, and it's very simple, right? It increases the count piece of state. No problemo, man. And here is where the student was beginning to already run into trouble. They began thinking in this regard. So remember, this is no-no territory, what I'm doing right here. This is bad. This is don't do. Right? They had an if statement, and they were like, okay, well, if the count is divisible by 4, right, then I would want to dispatch like some kind of action to toggle our Boolean state. And remember, I'm passing in the counts. I mean, I know this is redundant because I have that ternary check inside of my toggle action creator. Remember, it has the check inside of here when I pass in count, so this is technically completely redundant. But I would still like to point out that this is not going to work the way we think it does, right? So let's see what happens and check that out. It looks like we are off by 1. And that happens to be the case because we are referencing a state variable called count here in the scope of my app component. And whenever you reference state, I don't care whether it's Redux or a local useState or a use reducer, I don't give a flip. What's going to happen here is we are referencing what its value currently is and not what it's going to be. That's like in the React documentation, in my React course, in our full stack dev course, and what I say in Discord whenever I see students trying to do like basing one state update on another. I'm like, nah. The state is what it currently is, not what it's going to be. So some choices from there, and the student that asked me this question in that idle game ended up just saying, well, I computed what I thought the state was going to be. I did a little estimating and just went from there, and they ended up having it figured out. So let's see some other solutions that we can come up with here. I don't know whether this will be a whole like YouTube series or just this one video where I cover a couple solutions, but let's see what happens here, right? So again, this is not going to work because the state is what it's currently is. And it's the same thing if we got rid of the if statement. You're thinking, oh, if the if statement's wrong, just pass in the count to toggle and it'll figure it out from there. Well, by default, React will batch, and Redux Toolkit, I think, will batch all state changes together if it can, whereas it used to not. Now, all state changes, if it's possible, will be batched in one call. So even this will still be an off by 1, where the state is going to be behind 1 because it did the check on the current state, not what it's going to be. So that's why it's still showing up as false. So some options are, well, in this Contrived, how many more times am I going to hit the microphone, y'all? In this Contrived example, what's happening is it's very simple. So theoretically, I can say, well, forget about it. Just say add 1 to what the state's going to be. So we're going to pass in what it's going to be to try to get them back in sync. If it's an off by 1 error, let's just make it not off by 1. And there you go. That is one possible solution here if everything is synchronous. And again, in this, not going to smack the microphone, Contrived example, it's very simple. I can very easily compute what the state is going to be next by simply, well, adding 1 to the current state, and that'll inform this reducer to be in sync with my other reducer, and that ends up being a fine solution here. But in the case of the student, and probably y'all that are here looking to find some information about daisy chaining dispatches together asynchronously, y'all know that this won't work when your state is fairly complex. Like if you have objects of sub-objects of sub-objects and many properties toggling and changing on each other, then this ain't gonna do it, chief. This ain't gonna be enough to figure it out, despite it solving our little off by 1 issue here. Okay. So what choices do we have? Well, there's something pretty cool about Redux Toolkit in that it has something called thunks configured into its store. And a thunk is nothing more than a function that returns an inner function that has access to our store's state and our store's dispatching function. So thunks are used to typically handle asynchronous actions in our Redux store, because by default, Redux is fully synchronous. So in order to make it asynchronous, you have to add a middleware to your store, either Redux Thunk being popular and what's in Redux Toolkit, or Redux Saga, which is the other popular asynchronous action library for Redux, right? But Thunk is built into Toolkit for us, which means we have access to some functions from it. So for example, in Toolkit, we have something called createAsyncThunk that gives us, AsyncThunk rather, createAsyncThunk that allows us to make our asynchronous actions and be able to dispatch them and kind of handle them as if they were promises. So let's see how we can handle this. I'm going to kind of include it down here in my list of actions because it kind of makes sense. So I'll kind of have it down here. You know, I like leaving comments for myself as well, so I know like where my thunks begin compared to my actions and whatnot, but whatever. We're going to call this increase async. Increase async. And we're going to assign it our value of createAsyncThunk, which is a function that takes 2 arguments, a string and a function to run. Now, this string, I'm going to make it called count / increase. Is what I called it, yeah. Sometimes I call it increment and I get myself confused upon content that I make. Oh, goodness. But yes, we're going to call it count / increase async. Why not just call it pizza? Well, pizza works, but, you know, Redux Toolkit has this pattern, this paradigm that it follows that says name of the state / and the name of the action creator. So I'm kind of following the same thing where I'm saying name of the state / the name of the action creator here, or thunk in our case. So I'm following a paradigm for our action type property here in Redux. And this function right here does have arguments, but in our case, we don't care what they are at the moment. I want to pretend this is indeed fully asynchronous, because at the moment, I don't have any kind of asynchronous code, so watch this. We'll make some kind of fakey delay function. We'll call it const delay is going to be a function that returns a new JavaScript promise that will then resolve immediately, aka after what? Let's do a full second so we can really see this in action here. So I have this little delay function here, and we're gonna make this asynchronous. I should do like try, catch, and error handling, but I don't care. I just want to have that nice async keyword above my head here that allows me access to that await keyword, so I can say, hey, wait 1 second on this line before we return something from here. So increase async complete. Okay. This is our createAsyncThunk, right? We have done an action creator that's actually a thunk that has access to our store and dispatching and whatnot, but in this case, we're not using it. We're simply telling it to wait 1 second and then return this. And this is our payload of our action payload. So it's just a string value. If you wanted to know something is complete, I can return 5 or true or whatever. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Again, when I'm logging stuff, I like to give myself return string value so I can see where things are firing. But just because we created this action, this async thunk doesn't tell our reducer how to handle it. So this is where the use case of the extra reducers object, or rather function syntax, I think it was called, no, not build queries, what am I doing? I think it was called just builder, if I'm not mistaken. Right, this builds our extra reducers where we can have a builder.add case to handle what happens when increase async has a fulfilled action type. So we're looking for that type right there of action fulfilled. When that asynchronous action is fulfilled itself, it has several pending states of that async thunk. It's all built into it for us from Redux Toolkit. Again, I have a course on this if you're interested in learning more. If you're getting to this point, you're like, wait, it does? How did you know that? Well, A, you can always read the documentation, or B, again, check out the description below. So what this is going to do for us is, it just needs to increment the state, right? So it needs to have access to our state, which it does because it's in the scope of our counter slice here. And it's going to do the same thing, just simply increment the state asynchronously. There we go. And this is more in line with what my student was dealing with because they were dealing with an interval timer in a game. This asynchronous stuff happening here is more in line with what they needed to have happen, right? So, okay, we've exported out increase async. So let's go ahead and import it here into our application. And now we're going to see what happens if I do a dispatch on click to increase async. Let's see if it's actually asynchronous or if I'm just yanking y'all's chain, right? Click 1000 updates. So now we have that state update. But, so you would think, oh, well, sick, dude. Now I can just say it should await that thing to finish, and then I can once again call toggle and pass in the count, right? Well, unfortunately, no. Remember, this still represents what it currently is, not what it's going to be. And Jenga, right? It's still one behind there, as you can see. So, okay, that's not going to be the case. If statement's not going to delay it. Well, is this thing asynchronous? I mean, let's find out. What if I just do async and then say stop here, and let's see what happens. Well, yes, so dispatch, right? It returns an action. So whenever you call dispatch, it returns an action to our code here. So that's why await is saying it has no effect on this type of expression. If I do, for example, const res equals dispatch, and you're wondering, well, what does it return, if anything? Every dispatch action every dispatch action creator should simply return. It does return a promise. Look at that. So I was gonna say, like, it should recognize. I don't know why it's not recognizing that it doesn't have the await capability there, even though it does. Oh, I removed the async keyword, so let's see. This is something I actually didn't try on my own. I kind of thought of it while I was making this video to see if I could handle that use case there. So I mean, it's indeed awaiting the value there, but as you can see, that second dispatch is still looking at what the state is, not what it's going to be. It has no logic to do that. So then the other thing is, because we know that this dispatch does return a promise because it's asynchronous, I know why. It's because I'm not in TypeScript, which I'm normally used to being in. So this dispatch function from React Redux has no clue what middlewares my store has. So it is unaware that dispatching can be asynchronous. That's like, nah, dude, all dispatches are synchronous by default. So when you're in a TypeScript scenario, you can actually tell your dispatch use hook function what middlewares your store has. Meaning if it has a thunk middleware, meaning, oh, you can have asynchronous actions, my TypeScript would have told me that that await keyword is actually fine, even though here in vanilla.js, it's like, I don't think that's how it works, dog. So yeah, I like how I go from TS to JS gets me confused, go figure. But because we know that returns a promise, your next thought would be, okay, well, when it returns, then I want to dispatch the toggle divisible by 4 example with the new count, right? And again, this, we can't use like count here as an argument because we just saw when we console logged it that this resolved result from the promise is that action type or action object that has a type and payload and some metadata, right? And there's that payload I was talking about being that string that I returned from my createAsyncThunk. So still, that won't inform what's happening here, right? It doesn't tell us what our state's going to be still. Okay, so what if we just do another async thunk on our divisible by 4 solution and also make that asynchronous? Let's see how that's going to end up working. So watch this, y'all. And we'll dispatch that toggle, and let's say we'll simply daisy chain another dot then and say we're done with both async actions once they've both done their job upon this button click. We're going to head to our divisible by 4 function and also import and use our createAsyncThunk. You know, we could use that delay function. It'd be kind of annoying when they're both delayed by 1 second. So we're going to copy this delay function and move it down to like half a second so it's not so agonizingly slow to look at the examples here. There we go. And we'll say we'll have an export const toggle async that will be an assigned value from createAsyncThunk. 2 args, remember? Here's where it's going to get fun. I would likings to call it divisible by 4 / toggle async to match the paradigms. So this has a couple arguments. The first one we're not going to worry ourselves with because it's not going to help us in this case. And again, if you're curious about it, go check out the docs or buy my course. And this second object here is where it's really going to help us. The second object has access to our store, right? So it has access to our payload creator, right? It has access to something that we're going to be using here, surprise, surprise, called getState. So if you know anything about vanilla Redux, you know that getState is the function from our Redux store. Let me so I can move it in screen here. There we go. GetState is a function. So this is our Redux store. GetState is a function that, well, gets the state of our store, right? So by the time this asynchronous action is fired, the store should have updated from our first asynchronous action called increaseAsync, which means I can say return a call to getState, find the count state and the value of that count state. And this is all because I wrote objects as my initial state. That's why I'm daisy chaining these properties here, how I set it up. And when we return that count value with toggle async, let's go handle our extra reducers to handle the case when it is resolved correctly. Our builder function. You can do object properties, but Redux Toolkit and I do recommend you do the builder and add case, the builder function and do add cases to handle these. So when toggle async has a fulfilled status, we wish for it to run with a state and an action, or the state of our divisible by 4 state and an action, so we can utilize a payload. It's going to be the exact same code we have up yonder. State value equals action payload, ternary if it's divisible by 4. And this is the action.payload. We're returning the count of the store after it's asynchronously updated. We asynchronously toggle this one in order to run what our true current state value is, or what it's going to be. We're just kind of telling it to delay, to wait until it's correctly and asynchronously dispatched. Then we asynchronously run this one, and voila, it should have access to what our state currently is, and it should not be out of sync any longer. Finally, and Jenga. What do y'all know? It didn't work. So what did I forget? We have toggle. We have it all set up here. I called it. Nope. I forgot. Look at that. Hopefully, get in the comments if y'all saw what I did there. I forgot to put toggle async up here. I'm still running the vanilla toggle function, boys and girls and everyone else. Toggle async. There we go. So we have our toggle async function, our action creator happening right there. That's what I meant to do in the first place. Haha, joke's on y'all. I was seeing if anyone was paying attention. Pop quiz. Everyone except for the people that are commenting failed. Let's try that again. And we're in sync, y'all. So this is a cool technique that you can use to daisy chain multiple asynchronous dispatches together and have them inform each other on the next action that has to happen. A lot of the times in my students' cases, because they had this crazy complex game that had all these weird edge cases that I and my co-instructor Andrew, who also has cool videos on our YouTube channel, check him out, help the student build this game with and debug and add features. This is another good use case if you have, for example, one fetch request, like an API request that you have to let resolve, dispatch, add to your state, and then based on that, then fire another action to go maybe fetch something else based on that returned value from an API, for example. So that's where this would really kick it into the next level, where you can say dispatch a fetch of all the users. Okay, once that's done, set them to that piece of state because we're going to use it maybe on a different view. Then when that's done, go through that list of users that we just fetched. Maybe we don't know their IDs, for example. Maybe they're all UUIDs. Then when we have that list of users set to a state, let's go fetch their public profile information based on their UUIDs, like our 10 top users or something like that. So we need to have one thing fire, set to a piece of state to use somewhere, but also set another piece of state dispatched via another asynchronous action to, say, fill out some more information from a separate API call. That's where something like this would really come in handy to be able to daisy chain dispatches together. So hopefully y'all enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun putting this together and trying to come up with it. This is actually my second recording because I realized my mic settings were really off in the first one. So hopefully y'all learned something from this and saw some cool techniques you can do. Again, check out the description below for a link to this repo, a link to the video where I build an example Redux toolkit. If you're curious, my first video in the Redux Persist series, check out and sub to our YouTube channel because we're pumping out content. And if you, at the very least, come hang out in our community in Discord and sign up and check out our courses, or at the very least, just come chat in general and ask some general coding questions. So this has been Luke, and ta-ta for now, y'all.